I was interested in writing largely because I was quite a keen reader and I still enjoy reading very much. And I did attempt it as a child. I started writing a novel, I thought, and it was in Urdu. I think it's interesting to think back on it and think, what would I have been doing if I had just been there?
My first instinct, even as a child, was to write about something that I was undergoing, especially if it felt a bit traumatic. It was a way of making sense of the world to myself.
I knew from a very young age what I wanted to do. But I also spent a large part of my 20s doing other work because I wanted to learn about the world. I think I had this idea that I'm not going to be stopped. And I think that is often what makes a difference.
And now I think for me it is another form of doing politics, my writing. It's another way of trying to address the world and try and change it. I mean, change it might sound too pompous, but at least to raise awareness of the things that I feel strongly about.
There was an Asian woman called Balwant Kaur who was murdered in a refuge in front of her children by her husband because of a breach in refuge security. And I think I got interested in the idea of looking at why it should have happened. So I went to actually teach creative writing at a refuge, and I did workshops for a couple of months. It felt like the right way to research it rather than go and ask women crude questions about what had happened to them. And it gave me an insight into refuge life, and that's how Song for a Sanctuary came about.
My first novel, A Wicked Old Woman, I actually kind of completed that after I'd kind of semi-left the workshop. I sent it to the Women's Press as well, and they accepted it and it was done. At that time I was writing, a lot of my work was kind of specifically to do with Asians, so my characters were Asians and the themes were often to do with being a woman in the Asian community and so on.
I suppose I've written mostly about women, and I suppose a lot of my work is non-fiction. Provoked was the story of an Asian woman who faced violence from her husband over 10 years. Then she set fire to him and she was done for murder. And she was in prison for life. And then as a member of Southall Black Sisters, we ran a campaign and got her released. So I wrote the story of her. We both wrote, I mean, she talked to me. I translated from Punjabi to English and structured her story, and we published Provoked, which was then made into a film. I co-wrote the script on the film.
For example, for the book, We Sinful Women, that I did, was the actual original work, which is so beautiful. I think I'm quite inspired by beauty. I'm quite interested in a kind of desire to make something beautiful, to create pattern in your life. It's a search for meaning. I think writing is also has a therapeutic aspect to it. It gives you comfort against the thought of mortality. It gives you the sense that you have power when you don't.
Then I wrote Enslaved. What motivated me was it was a collection of stories of illegal immigrants to this country, and to look at the connection between immigration controls and being open to exploitation. So instead of doing a sort of dry tract on it or a purely polemical piece, I thought that how do you swing people's sympathies except by telling stories, and telling stories using novelistic techniques. I applied to the real life interviews with people from all over the world. So I have two children in it. One came to this country at the age of 14 from Sierra Leone. One of them was 17. She was trafficked into the sex industry from Russia. There was also a man in it, a Chinese guy who was smuggled into this country, and his kind of horrendous journey into Britain and so on.
The collection itself that I did in the end, which was a selection of feminist poetry from Urdu, resistance poetry written during General Zia's time, is in fact one of the pieces of work that I have done, which has given me quite a lot of profile internationally. It's still taught in a lot of universities and very highly respected in Urdu circles.
I do know that my current manuscript the original idea was sparked by a photograph taken around India, and it was of a circus, and that just, it set something off. So you don't know, it's at the end of the day, it's anything. I think it's to do with actually wanting to say something.
At the moment, I've got something called The Ballad of Nihal Armstrong. Don't Wake Me is the sort of new title for that, which was based on my life with my son, who was disabled and who, faced a huge amount of prejudice in terms of education, in terms of society at large. So again, that's a personal story, but there is a kind of underlying political thrust to it. And that's being performed in theatres this year, in various theatres, kind of doing a little mini tour.